There's a truth about addiction that most people never hear, one secret that can set you free if you let it. But you'll only find it if you watch until the very end. Don't look away, because missing this might mean staying trapped forever. You probably don't realise how much of your life is shaped by battles you can't see. Addiction isn't just cigarettes, alcohol, food, or scrolling your phone late at night. It's something deeper, something ancient. It's the war between the life you're living and the life your soul is calling you to live, between the comfort of numbness and the courage to feel, between running from your personal legend and finally facing it. Addiction isn't weakness. It's not a character flaw or a lack of willpower. It's a spiritual cry, a message from your soul that you've lost your way, that you've abandoned the path you were born to walk, that you're trying to fill a sacred void with something that was never meant to fit. And until you understand this, or really understand it, you'll keep fighting the same battle over and over, losing every time. Let me tell you about a woman named Sofia. Sofia was 34 when she finally admitted she had a problem. Not to anyone else. She'd become an expert at hiding, but to herself, in the quiet moments, in the 3 a.m. darkness when pretending became too exhausting. On the outside, she was fine. Successful marketing executive, nice apartment, active social life, always smiling, always busy, always okay, but inside she was drowning. Every evening, the same ritual. Come home from work, pour a glass of wine, tell herself it's just to unwind, just to take the edge off, just one. But one became two became three. Until the bottle was empty and she was numb enough to sleep without thinking, without feeling, without facing what was really wrong. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Sofia had dreams, real dreams, not career goals or material ambitions, but soul dreams. She wanted to be a photographer, to travel, to capture moments of beauty and truth, to create something meaningful. She even started. In her 20s, she saved money, bought a camera, took workshops. She felt alive when she was shooting, like she was doing what she was born to do. But then reality intervened. Her father got sick, bills piled up. A friend offered her a temporary marketing job that paid well. Just until you get back on your feet, she told herself. That was 12 years ago. The camera gathered dust. The dreams got postponed, then forgotten, then buried so deep she stopped acknowledging they ever existed. She told herself she was being responsible, practical, adult. But her soul knew the truth. She had betrayed herself. And that's when the wine started. Just a glass at first. Just to relax. Just to quiet the nagging voice inside that kept asking, is this really your life? Is this what you were born for? The wine became the buffer between who she was and who she'd become, between the life she wanted and the life she was living, between the truth and the lie she told herself every day. She wasn't drinking to celebrate, she was drinking to forget. Forget that she'd abandoned her dreams. Forget that she spent 8 hours a day doing work that meant nothing to her. Forget that she was 34 and felt like she'd never really lived. The addiction wasn't about alcohol, it was about escape. About not having to face the unbearable truth. She had traded her soul for security, her personal legend for a paycheck, her authentic self for approval. One night, after finishing a bottle of wine alone in her apartment, Sofia looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked. The woman staring back was a stranger, tired, hollow, lost. And for the first time in years, Sofia asked herself a question she'd been avoiding. Who am I? Not what I do, not what I own, not the roles I play. But who am I really? She had no answer, because somewhere along the way she'd lost herself completely. There's an ancient wisdom about addiction that modern approaches often miss. It's not about chemicals or habits or triggers. It's about the sacred void. Every human being is born with a space inside them meant to be filled with meaning, purpose, connection to something greater. Call it soul, call it spirit, call it your personal legend. The name doesn't matter. What matters is this, that space demands to be filled. When you're living your authentic path, when you're honouring your soul's calling, pursuing what makes you feel truly alive, that void is naturally filled. You feel whole, complete, connected. But when you abandon that path, when you betray your deepest truth, when you live a life that looks good on paper but feels empty in your heart, that void remains, and it aches. That ache is unbearable. So you fill it with something, anything, Alcohol, drugs, food, shopping, sex, social media, work, drama, busyness. Not because these things are inherently bad, but because you're using them to fill a space they were never meant to fill. This is why willpower doesn't work. This is why just stopping doesn't work. This is why most people who quit an addiction eventually relapse or replace it with another. Because you haven't addressed the real problem, that empty space in your chest where your life's meaning was supposed to live. You can remove the substance, change the behaviour, create new habits. But if the void remains empty, you'll eventually find something else to fill it. The pain of living a life disconnected from your soul is too great to bear sober. Sophia began to see this slowly, painfully. Her drinking wasn't the problem, it was the symptom of a life unlived, a dream abandoned, a self betrayed. She wasn't weak, she wasn't broken, she wasn't failing at sobriety. She was spiritually starving, and she'd been trying to feed her soul with something that could never nourish it. There's a story about a man who spends his whole life searching for treasure, travelling the world, facing dangers, only to discover the treasure was buried in his own backyard all along. Sophia realised she'd been doing the opposite. She'd buried her treasure, her dreams, her passion, her authentic self, and spent years travelling further and further away from it, desperately trying to fill the emptiness with substitutes. One evening, instead of pouring wine, Sophia did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She took out her old camera. Her hands trembled as she held it, not from craving alcohol, but from something deeper: fear, grief, recognition. She walked outside with no destination, just walked. And for the first time in years, she started looking, really looking, at light, at shadows, at faces, at moments. She took one photo, then another, and something extraordinary happened. For those moments, the craving disappeared, not because she had found some magic cure, but because of those moments she was doing what her soul was born to do. The void wasn't empty anymore, it was filled with purpose, with meaning, with truth. This is the secret they don't tell you about addiction. You don't beat it by fighting the craving, you transcend it by fulfilling the calling. When your life has meaning, you don't need escape. When your days are filled with purpose, you don't crave numbness. When you're connected to your soul's path, the substitutes lose their power, not because you've become strong, but because you've become whole. But here's the part that's hard to hear. You cannot skip the pain. Sophia wanted to. She wanted the transformation to be clean, easy, linear. She wanted to just stop drinking, pick up her camera, and have everything magically fall into place. Life doesn't work that way, because between the life you're living and the life you're meant to live is a desert, a necessary crossing, a journey through everything you've been avoiding, the pain of regret, the shame of wasted years, the grief of abandoned dreams, the fear of starting over, the terror of being seen, the vulnerability of trying something that matters and possibly failing. This is why most people stay addicted, not because they can't quit, but because they're not willing to face what's on the other side of quitting. Sophia's first weeks without alcohol were hell, not because of physical withdrawal, though that was real, but because of spiritual withdrawal. Without the buffer, without the numbness, she had to feel everything she'd been running from: the disappointment in herself, the anger at the years she'd wasted, the fear that it was too late, the shame of how far she'd strayed from who she wanted to be. Some nights, the pain was so intense she'd sit with an empty glass, fighting the urge to fill it. Not because her body craved alcohol, but because her mind craved escape from the brutal honesty of her own thoughts. But she didn't pour, she sat with it, she felt it, she let it break her open. And here's what she discovered. On the other side of that pain was power. The pain wasn't punishment, it was purification. It was burning away everything false, everything is pretend, everything she'd built to avoid being real. Every night she sat with the discomfort instead of numbing it. She reclaimed a piece of herself. Every morning she chose her path over her addiction. She proved to her soul that this time was different. This wasn't about discipline. This was about devotion. Devotion to the person she was born to be. There's an ancient practice called alchemy, the transformation of lead into gold. But the real alchemy isn't about metals. It's about the soul. It's about taking the heaviest, darkest parts of yourself, your pain, your shame, your failures, your addictions, and transforming them into wisdom, into strength, into purpose. Sophia's addiction became her teacher. It showed her exactly where she'd abandoned herself, exactly what she was running from, exactly what needed to heal. Every craving became a question. What am I really hungry for? Every urge to numb became an invitation. What am I afraid to feel? Every moment of weakness became a compass. What path am I meant to be walking? She realized that her addiction had been, in its twisted way, trying to keep her alive, trying to make an unbearable situation bearable, trying to protect her from a pain that felt like it would destroy her. But now she understood. The pain wouldn't destroy her. Living a lie would. So she chose the pain. She chose the truth. She chose the desert crossing. And on the other side, she found what she'd been searching for in every bottle: herself. Sophia didn't become a famous photographer overnight. She didn't quit her job and travel the world. She didn't have some fairy tale transformation. But she started living again. Really living. She took photos every day, just for herself. No pressure, no expectations. Just honouring the part of her soul that needed to create. She started saying no to things that drained her. Yes to things that fed her. She let go of friendships that were based on shared numbness and cultivated connections based on shared growth. She didn't drink, not because she was white-knuckling through cravings every day, but because she didn't need to anymore. The void was no longer empty. Here's what she learned. Addiction ends not when you're strong enough to resist it, but when you're whole enough not to need it. You don't need to escape when you're where you belong. You don't need to numb when you're living authentically. You don't need substitutes when you have the real thing. The real thing isn't a substance, it's a life, your life, the one you were born to live before fear convinced you to settle for less. This is the part where most addiction stories talk about support groups, therapy, 12 steps, and those things can help. They do help, but they're not enough if you're still living a life that's killing your soul. You can have all the support in the world, all the tools, all the strategies, but if you go back to a job that makes you feel dead inside, to relationships that require you to be someone you're not, to a life that has no connection to your deepest truth, you'll eventually need to numb again, because you can't stay sober while betraying your soul. So the real question isn't, how do I beat this addiction? The real question is, what is this addiction protecting me from facing? What dream did you abandon? What calling did you ignore? What part of yourself did you lock away because it wasn't practical, wasn't profitable, wasn't acceptable? What would your life look like if you stopped running and started living? These are the questions that lead to freedom, not the temporary freedom of sobriety, but the permanent freedom of authenticity. If you're watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know the thing you use to numb. Maybe it's the same as Sophia's, maybe it's different, but you know. And somewhere inside, you also know what you're running from. The life you're not living, the person you're not being, the truth you're not facing. Your addiction isn't the enemy, it's the alarm. It's your soul screaming, "Wake up! This isn't the life you were born for. There's more. You're meant for more. Stop running and start living." I'm not going to tell you that quitting will be easy. It won't. The desert crossing is real. The pain is real. The fear is real. But here's what's also real. You cannot numb yourself into happiness. You cannot escape yourself into peace. You cannot substitute your way to wholeness. The only way out is through the pain, through the fear, through the honest reckoning with who you've become versus who you were born to be. But here's the promise. On the other side of that crossing is a life you can't even imagine right now. A life where you wake up excited, not dreading the day. A life where you feel connected, not isolated. A life where you're creating, not just consuming. A life where you're whole, not constantly hungry for something to fill the void. That life is waiting for you. But you have to be willing to walk through the desert to reach it. So here's what I want you to do. Tonight, before you reach for whatever you use to numb, ask yourself one question. What am I really craving? Not the substance, not the behavior, but what's beneath it. What are you actually hungry for? Meaning, connection, purpose, freedom, truth, your authentic self. Name it. Write it down. Feel it. And then ask, what's one small step I can take toward that real thing? Not tomorrow. Not when you're ready. Not when conditions are perfect. Today. Now. One small step toward the life your soul is calling you to live. Sophia is 3 years sober now. She still works in marketing, but part-time. She photographs on weekends. She's planning her first exhibition. She travels when she can. Her life isn't perfect. She still has hard days, still feels the pull sometimes, still faces fear and doubt and uncertainty. But she's alive, really alive, for the first time in years, maybe ever, because she learned the secret. You don't beat addiction by fighting it. You transcend it by filling the void with what was always meant to be there. Your authentic life, your real purpose, your soul's true calling. The addiction will never win again. Not because you're strong enough to resist it forever, but because you've become whole enough not to need it. The void is no longer empty. It's filled with you, the real you, the one you were born to be. And that, nothing can replace it. The bottle, the screen, the pill, the drama, they were never your home. You were always your own home. Now you're finally moving back in.